All right, Kyle, you can begin whenever you'd like.
All right, thank you, Jesus, and welcome everybody to the June 15th, 2022 meeting of the CB6 Executive Committee. My name is Kyle Thide, and I'm the chair of CB6. This meeting is called to order at 6:35 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez. And as a reminder, New York State law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. So tonight's minutes will be taken by the CB6 office, and we will begin taking attendance by roll call. Jesus will conduct the roll call, so please answer present when your name is called.
All right, everyone. Kyle Thide.
Present.
Thank you. Elby Barroso.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Bondi. Matt Bondi. All right, I'm not hearing anything. Claire Brennan.
Present.
Thank you. John Keller.
Present.
Thank you. Sandra McKee.
Present.
Thank you. Rich Mintz.
Present.
Thank you. Kevin O'Keefe.
Present.
Thank you. Reshma Patel informed us she could not be here tonight. Matt Roberts.
Present.
Thank you. Sandro Sharad. Sandro Sharad.
Sandra's here, but is your audio working, Sandra?
Judging by the concerned look on his face, it does not look like it's working.
Are you talking to me? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes,
All right. Sandro Sharad.
I am here.
Thank you. Mark Thompson.
He is excused.
Okay. Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Present.
Okay. And now with 10 out of 13 exec members here, there is a quorum.
All right. Thank you so much, Jesus. The agenda for tonight's meeting appears on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. So members of the executive committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom. All right, seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the May 18th meeting were distributed to executive committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt these minutes as drafted. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the May 18th meeting are adopted. In order to conduct an efficient meeting tonight, let's observe a few ground rules. First, no one may speak until granted the floor. 2 committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please first raise your hand through Zoom. Next, the chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. The chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information such as an email address or link that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Next, when a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will first identify you and then you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. We are required by New York State law to have a transcript of this meeting, so please keep all questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. And as said before, committee members are required by the state open meetings law to have their Zoom cameras on and your first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting, from call to order to adjournment. If you have to step away from your computer at any point, you're required to leave your camera on. So I will now deliver my chair's report. I don't have anything too detailed. Just some things to reiterate from the full board meeting last week. First of all, I want to thank Mark for filling in for me during my travels abroad. I want to thank Sandro as well in their capacities as first and second vice chairs. Thank you so much. I want to remind everyone that an elections committee has been established in accordance with our bylaws. That is being chaired by Larry Shire and is joined on that committee by Letty Steinman and Sandra Leftoff. As a reminder to everybody, especially to those on the elections committee, anybody who's interested in nominating themselves or nominating someone else for position on the executive committee, please do so by Friday, July 8th. Those elections, of course, will take place later this fall, but that's when nominations are due. If there are any questions about the process, please email on all inquiries to the board office at info@cbsix.org. All of those correspondence will be forwarded to the committee for their review. Also, a reminder to everyone and welcome in a new capacity to Executive Committee, Brian Van Nieuwenhoven, who I've appointed as the chair of the Transportation Committee. Congratulations again, and looking forward to working with you in this new capacity, and very excited for you to continue the work that Jean had been leading so fearlessly. Again, we are joined by 10 new board members. So over the summer, I will be working with all of you to figure out who should be on which committees, what your needs are as we look forward to the next year. So I want to make sure that we have the proper people on the right committees. This will also be a time for us to talk about committee vision for the next year as well. So please do take some time over the next month to prepare that. I'll be connecting with each of you to talk about that. And really want to make sure that we're using this time very productively going forward, where we are not only communicating with each other, but going into the weeds about ideas and things that we can bring a real benefit to the community. So please think about your big ideas, things that you want to be focusing on next year. Review the work that you have done over the last year as well, if there's any follow-up needed. Very similar to the conversations we've had previously, make sure that our agendas are leading to something, that we are following up and really holding accountable the stakeholders that we're supposed to be holding accountable. So just want to make sure about that. But before moving on to my last point, I see John has a question about something.
Yeah, it's just a question or a point of order. Does the governor's executive order extending the emergency until July 14th obviate the need for us to keep our screens on throughout the whole meeting? I'm not planning to go anywhere.
So you've jumped the gun, John. So that was my last point. For those of you, So for those of you who did not know,
never mind.
No, yeah, perfect. I mean, can't think of a better segue, right? So. As John mentioned, and many of you might know or might not know, the Borough President's Office just informed us about an hour ago, big surprise from the state, that the governor yesterday extended the emergency powers for yet another month. So this extends into July 15th as well. This does not change the nature of how we are virtual, but it does allow us to remain completely virtual up until that point. So that means we're allowed to be completely virtual until July 14th, 2022, if we choose to do so, which I think we should. So anybody who's impacted by that, you can continue to work virtually. Based on the conversation we had at our last executive committee, where we had the public hearing on the open meetings law, where we ratified the law as it was passed in the state budget, along with our separate resolution highlighting the changes that we wanted to see. I had the board office send that directly to the governor's office. Again, I don't know, this just seems to be happening every month, that the last second we are told this is being extended for another month, which is just really unfair to public bodies in general and to the public, but also to our staff, because this takes a lot of time and preparation to set up such processes and procedures to accommodate everybody. And at this point, it just feels like we're being jerked on a chain, so back and forth, and is really not okay. And so I'll continue to be pushing for that and working with our electeds to make sure that we get something more permanent and sensible. We all agreed that unanimously that the state budget process that established the new process was not logical, was not didn't actually address the problem that people were talking about or the needs that were presented by COVID. So we'll continue to move forward on that as well. But that's the chair's report. I wanted to make sure everyone is updated on that open meeting law, that it was extended for yet another month. So from June 14th to July 14th. And of course, this overlapped with the mayor's own emergency order that went to the 27th as well. So if you weren't confused already, hopefully you are now. But yeah, Sandy, I see your hand up.
Thanks. So does that mean that we don't have to do the cameras always on until after the law is enacted or changed? So in other words, we don't have to do that, have our cameras on, have our name in front until the open meetings law changes after June or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, and Jesus, I don't know if you want to jump in on this, because I know you've been, going in the weeds on this. I mean, this is not a huge departure from what we're doing already in having our names up and not really leaving. It was just that we were forced to do it before. As far as I understand, it doesn't change the way we are operating virtually. It just allows us to work completely virtually. And Jesus, am I saying that incorrectly, or?
Since the camera thing is what's being asked about specifically, the camera thing applies. The days of members logging on to an official meeting that's subject to the open meetings law and not turning on their camera, those are gone. At least for the next 2 years, because keep in mind that these changes to the open meetings law go until, I have to look up the date, but sometime in 2024. At least until those are repealed and revised, camera must be on for members forever and ever. It does not apply to the camera thing, does not apply to the public. It doesn't apply to staff. It doesn't apply to the agencies that may come and visit us or to any presenters we may invite. But yeah, the camera thing is in effect, and it will be in effect for at least 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Barring any kind of change from the state.
Thanks for the clarification.
Sandra?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer a thought. I mean, I felt like I understand if we have to take a few minutes to eat something or take a phone call or something, but I did notice that in a few of our board meetings, not necessarily the executive committee meetings, but in a few of our board meetings, we've had 4 or 5 people actually on camera, and it's unclear if anyone's even there, let alone paying attention. So, sometimes I've had to step away for a minute or two, which is one thing, but I would not just leave the camera off the entire meetings. I think it's just discourteous to the rest of the board membership.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, Sandro. And that's why, it's not a huge departure from what most of us are doing anyway, because we're all very engaged with the work that we're doing. We have our names up, we're on screen. In a way, it's just kind of like forcing us to do it. It's one of those things where it's like when you're forced to do it or being told to do it, it's a whole other thing, but we're already doing it. So it's not a huge departure, but it was one of those weird things where I did bring it up because I asked these type of questions. If someone needed to use the bathroom or someone needed to take a call or deal with, a family member that they're taking care of, is that, or is there going to be punitive action taken from the state or from someone else if that's off? So I think, our board, this is not really so much about our board as it might be about other public bodies, but just continue to remain, professional, on your screen, connected. We are public officials. We're not elected officials, but we are public officials that have a responsibility to our community. So being on screen and engaged and showing our thoughtfulness and dedication is part of the job description and being professional. So thank you, Sandra, for that. John, go ahead.
Yeah, this horse is beat dead, definitely. But if you suddenly see my keyboard instead of my face, it's to protect the privacy of a member of my family walking by.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you. And Rich, I saw your hand up earlier. Was your question answered?
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that concludes my chair's report, and I'll turn it over to Jesus.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Good. And also, we'll let the record show that Mark Thompson is in fact here, so we'll reflect that in the attendance. All right, I'll keep my report super brief. We've had a few questions about this, so I wanted to go ahead and explain it to you. We have a few new chairs, and then certainly we have 20% of the board that's new now. Some folks were having some questions about the fact that there are July and August dates on the calendar on the website. You can let your committee members know if they come to you with those sorts of questions that those are generally just there for informational purposes. The practice is still what it always was. Most of the committees do not meet in July and August. And after exec passes, the previous exec passes, those, for example, after tonight, most of you are not going to be meeting in July. So all those July dates are going to come right down. So if you get any kind of questions about that from any of your committee members, just let them know that unless you've told me different, those dates are going to come down after the appropriate exec meeting. And some of you, when we checked in with you a couple of days ago for your agendas for July, went ahead and told us, hey, yeah, we're not going to have any meeting in July and August. There's a process that we go through, and so even though you've told us that, we are going to still check in with you about your August meetings. If it still holds that you're not going to have a meeting, fine, just tell us again, and that'll be that. But just, we didn't forget, we're just sort of going through the process. If there are any questions on that, I can take them. And if there are not, that concludes my report. All right.
All right, not seeing any questions. Thank you, Jesus. All right, so we'll now jump into our committee agendas for July. So let's start off with transportation. Let's put the new chair on the hot seat.
Oh boy. Yes, put me on the spot. No, I am. Let's just get this started off. Our main priorities are what we were advancing before prior to the last couple of months and Jean's passing. So we're going to continue with all of that stuff. Anything that's essentially unfinished, we're going to see through to completion. That includes public realm stuff around Grand Central. That includes the 3rd Avenue stuff. We will, of course, continue with no substantive changes, proceeding with the same agenda items as we were in the past. That means that if a timely bus stop application comes to us, we will put it on the agenda. It means that if we get street co-naming applications that need to be handled in any sort of way, especially if it's timely, we'll get that handled, and we'll do it in the way that we did before 2020 and before there was a straw poll indicating that we wanted to take another look at that. I think the committee, in voting for a resolution for the board, that they signaled that they're willing to consider these proposals again without debate over the entire idea of taking those proposals in the first place. So we're just going to do that. So that's pretty much where we're at now. For July and August, I haven't been sent anything that needs to be forwarded to the committee. I have some invites to a lot of public meetings regarding some of these initiatives that either the committee chair or vice chair tends to attend, or that may go to other members of the board or the board office. So I will keep tabs on those. There is one big new thing that I'm going to throw in the mix here, and I have talked with a few people on the board with it. And you guys know that I have a lot of social media exposure and media exposure in general. So I get some ideas sometimes from the way that people in the district and in the city are talking about things and the movement of politics and advocacy support on things. I think it's important, and we're going to take this as a very long-term very slow moving initiative to talk about the future of the FDR Drive, specifically constrained to how it exists in our district. This is not going to be a shortcut for the pinch point. Pinch point is an initiative that we've been pushing forever at 14th Street. And some of the ideas for dealing with that have included taking a lane off the drive and widening the multi-use path next to the waterfront, because Con Ed is not going to give in the opposite direction and move any of those pump facilities or intake stuff that they have over there that's making it artificially narrow. This is not about that. This is more about a general thing, and this kind of tails with the discussion that many city authorities and advocates are having in Brooklyn with the BQE. If you guys haven't been following that, I will give you the most succinct thing I can. It's falling apart, and the plans are to either shore it up for a short time or rebuild it for the long term. And on top of the fact that rebuilding it or shoring it up would be an ungodly, expensive, and disruptive thing that drags out the existence of that for many years, there's also a problem where the use of that facility is simply abused at this point by overweight trucks and an excessive amount of traffic for which it was not designed for. And there's just absolutely no answer in terms of how the city or the DOT or the state or anybody is intending to kind of, right size traffic or congestion or anything like that. It just seems like everybody is pushing forward with bigger and more and higher counts of traffic all the time without making a real effort to see how can we eliminate all of this. On the FDR side, it's kind of a thing where there's already the whole idea that it sits on pretty prime real estate. It goes past a lot of residences. A very not talked about factor in the existence of the FDR Drive is it is a highway in our neighborhood. It introduces a lot of highway traffic on the local streets around there, and therefore creates significant Vision Zero difficulties and traffic management issues in terms of when there's not a lot of congestion, because the roads are all designed for peak hour and UN General Assembly and all that other type stuff. When the roads are not utilized, especially in the off hours, they're very dangerous, and we're getting a lot of this. This is one of the reasons why we're proposing the Third Avenue things. People are drag racing up it essentially because they're going to the tunnel or they're going to the FDR Drive or they're going to the bridge. So there's that element of the FDR existing that's no good. It's a big hulking overpass. Here's the thing: I have no illusion that it's going to be shut down next year. The way I think of it is, the more that they maintain it, the more that they do major capital projects on it, the more that we're pushing off into the future a date when we might consider how to better use that space. I think that if that is there in 80 years, it's literally right out my window. It's right here. If that's there in 80 years, handling the same amount of traffic, the city has failed. That's why we start discussing now what the visioning is for this. We start negotiating with DOT, and we start getting information from advocates about what it might look like if we right-sized it. We start getting some ideas about if there can be exits closed, or if there could be actually improvements to release traffic and congestion and mitigate some of the pollution things without actually increasing the capacity of it. We should also present the district with a pretty fair assessment of how it's used, which is to say that, vehicle ownership in our district, especially in this part of the district near the drive, hovers around 10%, 8%. So it's not our residents that are using it. It's people in Brooklyn driving up to the Bronx and Westchester. It's people from Westchester driving into downtown Manhattan. That is information that should be put in front of people a little bit more clearly than outlets like Street Blog and some of these Twitter accounts tend to do. My vision for this is that we don't make any decisions, we don't make any resolutions up front. That would just surprise everybody in the district, and it would be unwelcome, and it would be potentially poorly received. What I think we should do is have 1 or 2 information sessions, panel discussions, sort of in the way that the health committee does, where instead of us talking, we're listening. We're hosting it. I'm hosting it. I'm not trying to put that on the board office. I'll try to organize it as best as possible with my own, capabilities. And we will invite some experts, and we will invite the public to give public testimony like it's a public hearing, with the mindset that we might write a resolution in the future. I don't have any conclusions about what a resolution might look like, but things that could be included in such a resolution is a sunset date or a sort of a board resolution to say, this is what we think that this facility should do. And if it starts, if there's any sort of end of life or, functional obsolescence of it, you should consider winding it down and expanding the waterfront. There might be a lot of pieces in this. There may be some, I'm kind of still looking into this, so I don't know if this applies to like 197A or whatnot. But I think we should take a look at this. I think it's absolutely one of these things that there are split opinions in the district, and that you would probably be surprised at how many people in the district think that maybe we should consider closing it or converting it to something else, or sizing it down or whatever. I think we should start to consider airing that out. This is where it's not really in our wheelhouse because, a lot of deliberative bodies in general like to talk about things and put focus on things that are easy to pass because they have unanimous opinions. This is definitely not going to be a unanimous opinion thing. This is going to raise a lot of, concern and potentially anger. I'm not trying to anger the district. I'm going to just try to make this a kind of very neutral, level-headed, sort of logical progress. But if we get to the conclusion that we should add some restrictions to it, or add some lane narrowing, or even just suggest closing it between 60th Street and 18th Street and just saying, hey, it's not a through route anymore, we're going to take that and make that the East River Greenway that we feel like we've deserved, then that's the conclusion we get to. And that's, too bad for the 10% of people who have plenty of ways of getting around the district. There's nothing on the drive, no critical facilities, no businesses, no nothing. Every truck, every commuter coming into the city has to go somewhere else, and they don't have to use the drive. There's a lot of traffic capacity, especially with congestion pricing upcoming. So I want us to discuss this, and I think it's a big thing. And before we actually do anything decision-wise, my plan is to try to collect feedback that I know is out there that we probably haven't heard on it. And I think we should move on the process to this, because I think if we have something in place in 2 or 3 years in terms of a future vision, it may start to guide DOT and state DOT to take some radical action and do what some other cities are doing, which is create far better spaces than what is served in cities for people who actually don't live in those cities. Does anybody have any questions for me?
So I want to jump in quickly, Brian. So just for the rest of the executive committee, this is something that Brian and I have talked about for quite some time. And one of the things that I want to encourage all of you to do, which is, again, my mantra is always proactive, which is to have these kind of conversations in the public sphere. This is something I think, many of us have heard in different ways. And whether it ends up, being something that actually happens or not is a whole separate conversation, but it's something that the community board is a space to have these types of discussions. So as you all look again into your own committees, as I asked, everyone reflecting on the work that you have done and the work that you want to do and the ideas that are going forward. I think this is an excellent, model to look at in terms of having these sort of like big picture conversations or out of the box thinking, which is what the community board should be. So this is also something that I think, a lot of the other committees can also be a part of these conversations, because there are things that we assume and think. So as Brian gave a couple examples, about the business connections, this and that, and so forth, and whether they truly don't exist or not, is that we know that those are potential arguments and components of a conversation. And so I think this is something that all the committees can be a part of, and having those conversations, because as we all know, whenever we try to create big change, there's always some sort of excuse or explanation or things that we're not considering. So I think this is an ongoing conversation, and thank you, Brian, for jumping in on it. All right, so I don't know if there are any questions for this. Obviously, there are many more conversations about this to be had. And of course, Brian can be reached offline as well as we delve into these conversations. But if there are any initial reactions or comments or questions, please feel free to raise your hand.
I don't have a question about his FDR topic. I actually have a question about what he mentioned right before, sort of operationally. Brian, you mentioned that regarding the subject of co-naming, street co-naming applications. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the way your committee is going to handle those is it will handle them according to the process that was in place pre-pandemic, that resolution that was referred back to your committee that sought to establish a new procedure. That one will not be taken up again. We can consider that gone, and we'll just revert back to what we did before the pandemic. Am I correct in my understanding?
You're correct in your understanding. And also I'm under the belief, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there isn't actually anything that bears the weight of obligation to the committee in how to do the process. I guess it's just something that the chair and the committee can take up these applications as we feel suitable, and that the board is not obligating us to do anything in a particular fashion. I think we will take up some of those earlier guidelines. I've been on the committee for 8 years at this point. When we handled street co-namings in the past, there were only very small gaps in the process in terms of, some of this stuff. I guess somebody should have Googled the one guy. But otherwise, the process seemed to work. We just had a normal agenda item and we discussed the merits of the application. And if we had enough information and it seemed agreeable to the board, or it seemed agreeable to the committee advanced a resolution to the board.
Yeah, I guess, well, one, the committee, the office did Google that guy. Brendan found that piece of information. The committee chose, I guess, to ignore it or just didn't see it. But secondly, I guess to your question, no, I mean, the committee is empowered to sort of handle these things as it sees fit. It did pass a resolution in 2018 outlining not a super precise process, but a process. So it's probably best to handle them in that context. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I believe so. And, if any such information comes from the office, I don't want to point fingers. If the office actually did find that information that we're talking about, good on you guys. It affirms what you're doing is great. I will try to be as complete as possible with that and include all information and anything that I present as the chair. So I'll try not to let you down in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And yeah, I just want to make sure, because I know particularly with street co-namings, every board has its own process. While that whole thing was going on, I was, reading other boards, and some people do it once a year, twice a year, so on and so forth. So as long as the committee is comfortable with what's on the record right now, totally fine by me. Obviously, each committee has the power to organize their agendas as they see fit, or to waive comment on things as they see fit, on anything that's requiring comment. So as long as you feel everything that's in place is crystal clear, not just to the committee members, but to the public, then totally fine. If you feel that, resolution needs to be passed to reestablish that or to clarify or make things clear, please do so, because I don't want to get...
I don't think so. No, I think we'll just continue as is.
Perfect. All right. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the next committee. Thank you, Brian. Environment and Parks, Kevin.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. For a recap of the previous committee meeting, we passed a resolution on a dog run near the East River alongside the west side of the New Wave Pier. And of course, as we know, the next evening, the resolution passed the full board. The committee also had an in-depth discussion with the Parks Department public art liaison and 2 artists who have their work on public display in the district, to better understand the process for how art is approved for public parks. This was from a number of inquiries from the public that wanted to know why it took so long and why they can't necessarily get any feedback from the Parks Department. The committee also heard from a Parks Department regarding an employee regarding a gardener shortage that is impacting parks in the district. To be a little more specific, the district has lost its gardener because she was promoted. We have been told about concerns regarding district parks gardening at Stuyvesant Square, Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, and more. I'll jump to upcoming agenda. We do not have one yet for the next meeting. This is because, as reflected on the screen, we do not have a July meeting at this time. On requests for partnerships, we would like specs and any minimum standards needed for in-person community board meetings. This is because we have started discussions about the addition of the community center in the district, and we want adequate facilities for community board meetings. We'd like to know what those standards, minimum standards are. On community vision, it's still features opening more green space to the public. And it's nice to hear from Brian, green space near the river jives with what Brian, you and also Kyle just touched on. I will say that last week, Harvey Epstein joined previous supporters, Congresswoman Maloney, Borough President Levine, Councilmember Powers, and others who have expressed support of the committee's request that the green space over the Queens Midtown Tunnel be open to the public. I was there today with a couple of folks for an informal survey of that space. I guess I'll close by saying thank you to Brian again for your leadership and your willingness, and Kyle for your willingness to place the FDR Drive, including exit and entrance ramps, on the change radar. I look at the ramps that hug the East 37th Street underpass, and that may be a good place to start. Brian or Kyle, if you ever look to work cross committee on your FDR Drive vision, I'm sure Environments and Parks would welcome that because of the environmental impact of anything that's done there. That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And yes, as like I said, I think several committees will be part of that conversation. That is a massive undertaking. So especially with alternative uses for spaces like that, obviously green space is the number one that comes to mind. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
All right. We don't have a report from Budget and Governmental Affairs as Reshma is off, so we'll move on to the next committee. Health and Human Services, Elvie.
Hi, hello everyone. We didn't have a meeting last month, in June, and we're not gonna have a meeting in July and August, but we will continue to collaborate with NYU in planning the next webinar, which is going to be scheduled in the fall. And our committee of vision will be more proactive in addressing the health issues in our community. That's all.
Thank you, Elvie. And just out of curiosity, I know we had that survey and you reported back because they presented at the following committee meeting in May. Is there anything that you want to build off out of that? Any sort of initiatives or things that we should be focusing on in the district from their report back?
Yeah, that report is not it's not comprehensive because as I mentioned, Stuyvesant Town and Tudor was not included. So you know, or we won't be able to make a conclusion about that report.
Is that something that maybe you would think would be an interesting undertaking for the committee to kind of like do a health survey of the district and have something more comprehensive just to hear from people themselves?
We'll look into that one. I have to go back and look at what they used and
or even something just as simple, the same way we do surveys on, obviously it's not going to be a scientific method or, APA approved or anything like that, but something that's just kind of getting a sense of how people are feeling. I think especially after, COVID and pandemic, there's a whole lot of, issues that are popping up and maybe people taking their health more seriously or looking at it more specifically and nuanced than before. And it'd just kind of be interesting to know.
Well, we can always look at the community profile that is done by the Department of Health every year, and from there we can work on something.
Perfect.
That is more comprehensive than redoing another survey.
Sure. Awesome. Okay, sounds good. We can talk more about that.
Yeah.
All right. So seeing no questions for LV, we'll move on to housing and homelessness.
Yes, so we had no meeting last month and we are having no meeting this month. So I don't have much to say other than that I do plan to move forward over the next month on preparing some sort of public event for the fall around getting public input from renters about the issues that concern them, which is a priority that the committee raised in our last meeting.
Awesome. Thank you. I also wanted to just kind of give a shout out to the committee. I don't know if you noticed this, or I'm sure you noticed it, Rich, but didn't think about it. But last year after the storm over the summer, we focused on basement dwellings, particularly for those. While it didn't necessarily affect our district specifically so much, part of it was we didn't know how it affected our district or not. But many may have seen that last month or a couple of days ago that Assemblymember Epstein and Senator Kavanaugh passed a bill for tenant protections for existing basement apartments. And I think at the time we were the first board to really jump on that and discuss that. So very exciting to see that led to some legislation, but that those conversations started here. And obviously those conversations are taking place in other places, but just wanted to point that out and give kudos to Rich and the rest of the Housing and Homelessness Committee, because to me, that's what a community board does. We have those conversations, we bring it to light, we say that it's important to us, and things come out of it. So I just wanted to note that. All right, let's move on to the next committee. Public safety, Matt.
All right, so last month we had a couple of presentations. One was from the New York City Commission on Human Rights, which was more of an overview. But I think, one of the things the board should consider doing is holding some trainings from that agency as far as like bystander intervention, which is something that we discussed. So I just didn't think our committee was the proper audience for that. I think we need a bigger audience. And if we decide to go with a smaller group, then they tend to be a little more interactive, but I think that's definitely something that people can benefit from on a larger scale. So I know there've been some done in the past, sponsored by elected officials, but something I thought we would table that to the fall as a board. But I think it should be on our radar in some capacity. And then the other presentation was on cybersecurity. We were joined by a representative from the state, which is very high level on that. Upcoming agenda. So tomorrow's meeting, we're going to focus on security in the homeless shelters. I do have some crime information that I'll present to the committee. And I spoke to the DSS about what at least their point of view. Nobody's really able to join the meeting, but this really started out as a budget conversation, something that I think we need to put forth, definitely as a district needs item, but it's very complicated, as you might imagine. So other than that, no meetings for July and August. I think that's about all I have.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And I think if you're interested in sort of producing those trainings, I think it could work very similar to how the health committee does theirs, where it takes place for their monthly meetings. So if it's something that, maybe we move it to a separate date instead of the regularly held time, that could be something that we do. Obviously, totally up to you and your strategic goals for the committee.
Oh, all right. Yeah, we'll look into some options.
Yeah, but that's definitely an option. Yeah, instead of holding a meeting, you can hold one of those trainings.
Sure.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to land use and waterfront. Sandy.
Yes, we had a meeting where the EDC presented some of the information on the use of parking close to Solar One. Actually, a very frustrating meeting because they dole out information in very small quantities and insist that we go provide additional questions. It's always give us an additional question and we'll answer it. And so we still want to investigate more what can be done to have that space under the FDR used as public space instead of parking space. Some of their calculations for how much it cost, the rent for Solar One were really exaggerated. They didn't even have the right area for the building. So it's going to require some additional investigation on our part. We do have a meeting coming up where we're going to hear from the planning fellow. He was not at the meeting, our last meeting, mostly due to a scheduling error. So we're going to do that at the next meeting. And I think it should be very informative. It's a very good report that he's done. And I know I was telling at full board that if people do have the time to come, it's great. It's very interesting. It's 80 pages long. So this is a good way to kind of see what some of the highlights of his report. One thing, I'm going to the CAG meetings. We have one next week for, this is for the ESCR work. There doesn't tend to be too much that's affecting our district. They're moving forward. We did ask them about the bicycle detour, and I can talk to Brian more about that. We've continually asked them to come and speak to us about how that's working out. And they don't seem to have investigated it very thoroughly. It's not something they want to do, is to provide a more secure bicycle route. In terms of the FDR, yes, access to the waterfront, definitely. That's something our committee would like to work with. One of the things we tried to get involved with this spring, and we're not able to, is the equity and land use, which is a new law that's been implemented, and city planning is the one who's rolling it out, and we have not been able to get further information on that. So that's something we'll probably try and do in the fall. Upcoming meeting, yes, please try and attend if you can, or watch for the Zoom afterwards. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Are there any questions for the committee? Okay, seeing none. So we'll move on to youth and education. John?
Thank you. We don't have a meeting scheduled for June. What we did, the issue we raised, I think 2 meetings ago, which came to a vote of the full board on school safety, by just tragic and sad coincidence, preceded the Uvalde event by just a few days. So school safety is now on everyone's radar. We were actually a little ahead of the game with PS 40 and SALC. I attended a 5.5-hour meeting, 5-hour meeting of the Community Education Council last night, which I used to be a member. Now where I can happily put my screen closed and walk away for a bit. But this is a very large issue. There are people that want to lock the doors of our schools. There are people that want, you go all the way to armed guards, who want armed police officers present during drop off and pickup. I mean, so there's a wide range of opinion on the appropriate way to manage school safety, and I think our resolution was a good role model for a rational and reasonable approach. As to in general on the committee, as I said, the meeting last night went for 5 hours, and it wasn't always very calm. So on the committee, I'm constantly trying to find issues that we can discuss that are relevant, but that are not already being discussed by 32 school boards across the city and half a dozen citywide councils and panel for educational policy, and trying to find issues that are relevant where it's possible to hold an information session that is really an information session and doesn't become a food fight. I'm like Brian, well informed on how these issues are being discussed across the city and talk to people all over the city about them all the time. So that's what I'm going to endeavor to continue doing, finding good ways to talk about issues that directly impact people in our district, our zone, but don't overlap with elected boards that are already having robust discussions on them. And actually, I work very closely with CEC2, where we try to, support them on issues and where we try to be of help to them, which we were when they actually took they've taken 2 of our resolutions this year and basically rewritten them and presented them as the board's CEC resolution. So I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing, trying to find ways to have rational discussions of sensitive subjects and be in collaboration with elected bodies who are chosen by parents and guardians across the city to deal with these things. That's pretty much what I want to say.
All right. Thank you very much, John. And so we'll move on to business affairs and licensing.
Hello, everyone. So for July, our June agenda is still information in terms of who we're going to bring in. But we will have a presentation from the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce on the New York City Small Business Resource Network. So it would be great if we could kind of promote that to some small businesses, but I'll talk to Alexandra about that. And then whoever we pull in for the licenses, Kyle and I talked yesterday, and if there's no really controversial applications or anything, then I would want to cancel July, but also encourage committee members to think about upcoming topics. And so May, we had, I think I mentioned this in full board, but the Nail Salon Workers Association join us, and that was really informative. And I think there was a lot of energy after their presentation, but since the legislative session had just ended, we thought that we would either bring them back or just bring the conversation back up again in the fall. Other than that, I think I'll just stop there. Unless there are any questions, Jesus.
One quick one. So just to make sure I understand, for the July meeting, for next month's meeting, we'll wait to see how that shapes up, and if nothing controversial presents itself, then you might cancel that July meeting.
Yes, because I'll just use judgment on who is applying.
Okay.
Are you all set, Jesus?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're now at the old or new business section. If any committee member has any old or new business, please raise your hand. Yes, Mark, go ahead.
Trying to unmute myself, sorry. I'm sorry I missed the first few minutes of the meeting. Wasn't sure if we talked about the animal control, the shelter that was brought up.
I did not.
During the full board meeting, okay. Somebody from the public had spoke during public session about some complaints about how people weren't able to get in. I guess I'm trying to think what else he was saying, that a lot of animals in there. It's not like a lot of mistreatment stuff, and some people seem to be fairly familiar with the issue. And I did, said that we would talk about it in exec. So he says there weren't that many. The details were basically just that,
Yes, at public session at the most recent full board, Kyle, a member of the public, but I believe he's like an animal rights activist.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, was this the ADA thing or something, and they were closed? They said they were closed because of ADA accessibility or something like that, but it was really coverage for,
and how they've been closed for some time.
Okay.
Person said that the animals that are in there are being warehoused and that no one can go in there to view them or adopt them.
Okay.
And the claim is that the Humane Society has kept its doors shut because of COVID, but this person claims that it's actually because of an ADA issue. And so they reached out to our office, and we've been doing what we can to sort of treat it as a service request, trying to contact and liaise with the various city and state agencies that might have some jurisdiction here. But essentially, yeah, he wants those animals he wants the doors open so the animals can be adopted or them sent to other places where they can be adopted. And there were some concerns among a few members of the board, because, the Humane Society is generally well regarded. It's in our district. And there are even some members of this board who are contributors and supporters of the Humane Society. So it was distressing to hear such news.
So is there any veracity behind this? Did the individual send us anything over so that there's something that we can follow up on?
We asked him to send something to the office, and I don't know, Jesus, if he did or not.
He had actually contacted the office, weeks before. We're working with various agencies to see what can be done as a service request. The problem we're running into is sort of jurisdiction. Like, are any laws actually being broken, or any animals harmed, things like that. So that's where we're at right now with that. I mean, if what we can do is we can sort of put our heads together again and see if we can regroup. And I mean, I guess I need to know sort of what the board wants. I mean, does the board want these animals, assuming this is all true, and does the board want the animals sent somewhere else where they can be adopted? Do they want the Humane Society to open their doors?
Well, I mean, if all of it was true, I think it's to be some serious action taken, right, against the administrators, the Humane Society, and then obviously the most important thing is making sure that those animals get to some safe places where they can be adopted or are adopted themselves. So, but yeah, I was just I was listening to the meeting, but I wasn't sure if this was like a personal agenda or grievance or something, and it's kind of hard to proceed if there isn't any like hard information, but except for the claim of someone, and obviously that corrals a lot of people because that's a horrible thing if true. But I don't even know what we would ask an agency to do without something substantive to go off of, except for him complaining about it. So let's work offline, and let's see if we can reach out to this person and get maybe some of their correspondence or whatever it might be that can at least allow us to jump forward with something, say, hey, we were sent this is concerning enough for us to elevate it, and then just take it from there. And hopefully it's not something serious. So
what we'll do is we'll send you the interactions that we've had and the steps that we have taken and the outcomes of those steps, and then putting our heads together, we can see if there's some path forward.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Okay, but yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Mark. I appreciate that.
And Kyle, I'll talk to you offline about some more stuff on that issue.
Sounds great. Okay, so is there any other old or new business that anyone wants to bring up? Okay, so seeing no further business, we'll adjourn the meeting at 7:34 p.m. Less than 1 hour.
Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the